Welcome to DIAS TV. It was great to have you today. You gave a moment ago. You gave a lecture for the DIAS community, and it was on world order and disorder and change. And one of the things you touched on, TV, was the rise and decline of institutions. And I was wondering, could you give us a sense of where you see the long-term trends in IR, in global order? Are we going from order to disorder, especially in terms of institutions? Are they all coming undone?
Right. So thank you very much for having me. And the conversation I had with your colleagues at the seminar room was very eye-opening to me also. Yeah, institutions, one thing we have to understand is they are not as independent entities devoid of geopolitics. Mm-hmm. So they are part of that. They're part of the cycle of rise and decline of great powers, their interests, their commitment to collective action, problem solving, and their own elites' ideological commitment to it. But of course, in modern times, it's not just the great powers, the non-great powers, including many European states, small states, Denmark played a role, could play a role in certain context, certain geopolitical context. So I have argued elsewhere that the end of a war, world war, or end of a conflict like the Cold War ending, provide certain opportunities for institution building, institution transformation, institution rejuvenation. So now we are at a moment after the 2014 Crimean invasion by Russia, and also the rise of Xi Jinping, and more importantly, the rise of illiberalism in all these countries, in particular the United States. Of course, it's peaked at this current phase, but it has the movement was already there with Trump's first victory, and there is this completely divergent views on what constitutes the good life, what constitutes the better way to manage a society, what are the priorities, etc. So the institutional decay is very much tied to the rise of what I call new imperialism. The willingness on the part of this, especially the three critical great powers, United States, Russia, and China, to seek new spheres of influence and go back to, at least in the US case, a bit neo-imperial idea. Russia, yes, same neo-imperial idea. And when they are not succeeding, they are becoming frustrated and they're using military power, China less so, but of course in the South China Sea context, to rewrite the rules of international order and also to have a privileged position on the use of force, on legitimation of force, and with respect to commitment. So what is the underlying thing that's happening is a status conflict. And that status conflict is everywhere. We can talk about it. I think that is also affecting the institutions they favor, how they run the institutions, etc.
It does sound like this is quite a severe crisis for the institutions we've become habited to living in, ever since, as you say, World War I, really. So we've had about a century of institution building, with some bits of up and down, but they have all been multilateral, to an extent, liberal in character, rule-bound. In a sense, at least the idea in the institution has been universal, and everyone could come in. Are you now saying that, given this new powers and new ideas, sphere of influence, is this a fundamental crisis for the institutions we know? Will there be emerging new institutions, or do you see this mostly as a critical but still evolutionary trend within the institutions
I would call it a critical juncture and evolutionary too. The reason what I am saying is that you look at the behavior of the rising powers and China, they don't want to abandon all the institutions. They are selective. They want to reform the UN Security Council, for instance, Brazil and India and all. But they have also created their own institutions. G20 was one way. So This rupture is potentially damaging to many of them because they are not functioning well as they should be. But I think they realize that the only way to rise peacefully is through institutions. Institutions give them recognition, legitimacy, and a way to negotiate, mutually beneficial deals and agreements. But the problem is that the United States at this point is not very keen on institutions because it wants that idea of sphere of influence. So I mentioned in the talk these two competing norms. It has been in competition since the concert of Europe onwards, at least. The idea of sovereign equality, territorial integrity versus sphere of influence.
Yes.
So they are competing, and at this point in time, the great powers are in that mode, competing each other for their own sphere of influence. And my thinking is that there are very few takers to their way of thinking. Unless they get overwhelming military and economic dominance, they can probably control the world. But that has limitations, as we are already seeing the Iran war, that the weaker parties do have certain asymmetric capacities that include choke points. It could be some other choke point. The drones, the swarming of drones. And so the great powers, they are trying with their overwhelming advantage in traditional or certain type of kinetic power, but that kinetic power is no longer confined to them. Others are competing. So, but they are trying, the secondary states are also trying to maintain their autonomy.
And when you see the trajectory of the United States, U.S. policy in this global order, do you see the Trump presidency as a type of parenthesis? It's very driven by his personality, and it happens to be quite mercurial, as you say. Will it stabilize after Trump, or do you see the country going into an era where it is simply more unpredictable?
The latter. The reason is it is in a very status anxiety mode. It has been the ruling hegemon. It won the Cold War, according to many of them. Then it didn't last its hegemony 2 decades maximum. And this China rise, they never expected this fast or this comprehensive. They didn't expect the second ranking states benefiting from globalization and economic dispersal. So what's happening? There's two processes, both are status related. One is whenever a hegemonic power declines, it generates domestic forces. For and against, let's go aggressively to stop it. Others would say, let us retrench. So there's that competition is there. But what globalization did is an additional variable, which is the dispersal of economic activity beyond the United States. That is the multinationals or manufacturing going away, creating more class distinctions and other pathologies related to economic competition for the limited jobs and limited opportunities. In this case, unfortunately, the coalition that is persisting is the right-wing coalition. And they may lose short-term in elections, but they have a propensity to return, as Trump returned again, because the liberals' other side cannot solve these domestic problems with their mechanisms. These guys can't solve either, because it's so structural and it is so global in many ways. So this process will continue with the rise of China, with the rise of others, and they will try to use whatever instruments they have. The status conflict is a big deal for, say, Russia also. What instrument he had was military force to force these Ukrainians to submit to his status dominance. And the Americans are doing exactly the same. And there are countries such as Iran which are determined not to succumb. And they have also prepared for the last 40 years with their choke points. And so the asymmetric warfare is where these big powers often lose, but they recover sometimes because they have other capacities. So this war is, unfortunately damaging for the rest of the world who depend on this oil and currency, etc. But even for the US, and we don't know what this will create short-term and long-term implications yet.
We don't know yet, and some of the ideas and concepts that you introduce are obviously new for those of us who's been thinking about this during a more stable era of bipolarity and unipolarity and globalization and so forth. And so when it comes to our own world, TV, the world of universities and academic thought and inquiry, how well equipped are we to grasp these trends? If you could advise academia, what would you have us do to anticipate or read, understand the way of the world?
Yeah, so I think we need more interdisciplinary works. We need more conversation between historians, economists, political science, sociologists, because some of the concepts I introduced, sociologists dealt with the long-term background, status, domestic society mostly. International level, we have very little literature on it. And within international relations, we have created these paradigms, very pigeonholing. Either you are a liberal or a realist or a constructivist. You don't want to talk to each other because you don't agree with my... It's also driven by ideology, by the way.
Ideology and career making.
Career making, yes. And you're trained with somebody who does, and so you have to follow that. And to be very frank, European Union promoted that kind of pigeonholing too, to some extent. Inadvertently, maybe, because the funding goes to, unless you do something normative, you won't get any money, So there is that challenge. It's time to break this barrier. Let's talk to each other. Maybe you have an interesting perspective from realism or constructivism or liberalism. We need to look at the world and say how to coexist.
TV, I was going to finish with a question here, to our listeners and viewers and our community. Given all that we talked about, what would you recommend that they went out to read? What kind of book would you recommend? Maybe E.H. Carr. You mentioned E.H. Carr, but maybe something else. Is there something?
Classic texts.
Classic texts.
We need to go back to quite a bit of sociological literature, but they may not give you the full answer. I would go back to Gilpin.
Robert Gilpin.
Robert Gilpin. Doesn't mean that I agree with everything he says. His focus is on war and change.
War and change,
but
yes.
within that, there are some very interesting ideas. I would even go back to Morgenthau, which I mentioned in the discussion. Not all of Morgenthau's work, Politics Among Nations. There is a section on idea of diplomacy, 9 rules of diplomacy. And 2 of them, one of them says, never allow your junior ally to dictate your policy. Never allow public opinion to dictate your policy. And the great powers are violating those. So prudence is a very interesting idea in classical realism and other approaches.
Well, TV, with this overview of a more complex world, certainly both dangerous but also more hopeful in a way, and this recommendation that we engage the classic and we think anew and we're curious and interdisciplinary. And I want to thank you for coming to DIAS and giving us a lecture and talking to me today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, TV.